care and Becky does her consulting business. They might.
Okay.
I can ask them.
Yeah.
But
However they want to do it, it's all right.
Right.
We can always come there. I think you're on.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure if I was the only one, but I never, all I do is just delete. Like, oh, see, there's a few wackadoodles out there. Exactly. There's other things. There is definitely more important. And, well, if that's what you're passionate, and you want to be an advocate.
the December 2nd, 2024 Auburn City Council workshop will be called to order. We have one workshop item tonight. It's a discussion relative to Resolve 7, which is the interim trail resolve. We have several groups that have come to join us tonight to provide some information on this. If I could invite them up to the table. Sue Ellen Bordwell is here from Casco Bay Trail Alliance, Bruce Sleeper from Trail Riders Northeast, and Peter Cole from Maine Rail Group. And I haven't seen anyone from St. Lawrence and Atlantic Railway. Is there anyone from SLA here? He's not. And I'd recognize Misty Edgecombe's here from Park and Recreation and Jeremiah Bartlett from Complete Streets. Neither group has met to review this, but they may meet at some point in the future and provide us with their thoughts. So I think maybe for the council, the way to proceed, we'll ask the three folks that have joined us here to provide some information regarding the resolve, and if councilors can hold their questions till each of the three has had a chance to speak, and then council have a chance to ask questions regarding the issue. So Ms. Bordwell, if you want to go first, you'll have to hold the button down
The
while
whole time
you
I'm
speak.
talking? Hold it
Yeah,
down?
pull it a little closer to you, but yeah, it's
I'm not
only
sure I'm
active when you're holding
ambidextrous,
the
but I'll
button down.
try.
If you move over one seat, you could use that mic without.
No, that's okay. So my name is Sue Ellen Bordwell. I'm a resident of Yarmouth, Maine, and I'm here to support the Resolve number 7. It is also the first time I've returned to the council. In 45 years, I spoke to the council. It was in a much different place. You've improved. So Mayor Harmon and members of the Auburn City Council, thank you for having me, and thank you for bringing this resolution forward. 5 years ago, a group formed with a vision of a 72-mile trail loop that connects Auburn and Lewiston to Portland, Lisbon, Topsom, Brunswick, Freeport, Yarmouth, Cumberland, Falmouth, Pownell, and New Brunswick. The linchpin to making this trail possible is having an interim trail on the Berlin subdivision, which is the focus of your resolve. In addressing this resolve, the council is addressing a really big question, and that is, how can the St. Lawrence and Atlantic Berlin subdivision corridor best serve the Auburn community? Many years ago, Maine legislators had the foresight to pass the Maine Rail Preservation Act, protecting Maine-owned rail corridors by making them forever rail corridors. Whether these corridors become trails, wildlife sanctuaries, or are left unused and inaccessible to the public, they remain rail corridors. Maine law also provides a rigid process that allows temporary or interim use of these corridors for non-rail use. The process is the Rail Use Advisory Council, called RUAC. In April of 2022, Maine DOT Commissioner Bruce Van Note appointed the Portland to Auburn RUAC to advise the Maine Commissioner on the interim use of the St. Lawrence and Atlantic Berlin subdivision corridor. The RUAC for the St. Lawrence and Atlantic Berlin subdivision recommended interim trail use of the corridor with 7 votes out of 15. 2 additional towns voted to recommend interim trail use, but were too late to be counted, and the Auburn representative voted for a rail with trail. The commissioner of the Maine DOT received the recommendation of the RUAC. If Commissioner Van Note agrees with the RUAC recommendation, he will then propose a bill to the legislature that would authorize interim trail use of the St. Lawrence and Atlantic Berlin subdivision. So this is where we are now. By passing this resolution, the Auburn City Council signals to Maine DOT that temporary use of the corridor as a trail is the best use of the corridor for the city of Auburn. This resolution does not commit Auburn to an expensive funds, but this resolution does open Auburn to the possibilities of becoming a trail town. So what is a trail town? A trail town is a community through which a trail passes that supports trail users with services, promotes the trail to its citizens, and embraces the trail as a resource to be protected and celebrated. Trail towns are built on a relationship between the town, the trail, and its volunteers. Based on research, we know that trail towns receive economic, environmental, climate, and health benefits. In addition to studies of Maine's Eastern Trail, which show an impact of $44 million per year to the surrounding communities. In addition, research shows that trails have economic benefits that extend far beyond the trail town itself. The first concern of many town leaders often expressed in the question, how much will this building and maintenance of the trail cost us? Research has shown that the economic benefits generated by trails far outweighs the cost of land acquisition for trails, the trail construction, and the trail maintenance. Here are just a few other benefits. Among the economic benefits, increasing values of nearby properties, attracting home buyers who rank walking and safe biking paths as one of the most important features when choosing a new community, by boosting spending at local businesses such as restaurants, breweries, and snack shops, increasing businesses for hotels, B&Bs, and outdoor outfitters. They also attract business and increase local tax revenue. The environment and climate is benefited by providing trail options, cutting fuel expenses, offering a reliable transportation for short distance trips, especially for those without a car. Health benefits include reducing medical costs by encouraging exercise and other healthy outdoor activities. The American Heart Association has found that for every dollar invested in building trails, nearly $3 in medical cost savings may be achieved. Spending time outside on trails has been shown to reduce stress, anxiety, and isolation. Education benefits also include providing opportunities for physical activities that have been shown to enhance school learning. Trails are also a great equalizer. Trails provide low or no-cost recreation to families with low cost relative to other recreational services. Trails are free to everyone regardless of zip code, paycheck, age, gender, ability, or manner of use, walking, running, rolling, or pedaling. Trails link to public transit, completing transit systems with buses, trains, automobiles, walkers, and cyclists. Even Reagan National Airport is accessible by a bicycle and walking trail. Communities benefit by becoming connected or reconnected. Trails revitalize depressed areas, creating demand in underutilized spaces. Given these many valuable benefits and the opportunity to secure them for the people in and around Auburn, I hope you will consider support for this existing resolution. Many thanks for this opportunity. I will send the mayor a copy of my notes, including links to all the facts that I sent, because it's pretty easy to throw things around and not have real facts behind them. So that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Sleeper? Yeah, you'll have to hold the button on all of them.
Push and hold, okay, great. My name is Bruce Sleeper. I'm president of Train Riders Northeast, which was the organization, as I said, I think at my previous testimony, that got the Downeaster train service here. And we're still working on that, and we're still working on passenger rail stuff throughout the state of Maine and the Northeast. One of the major problems here is that even though, as has been just stated, in theory, the putting in the trail is a temporary step, and in theory, somebody could come back and put a rail back in there and force their way onto the line. In fact, that's just not the case. There's a legal right for anyone who wants to, after this is converted, if this is converted to a trail, to come back and force the trail off the line and put in rail. Unfortunately, from an economic point of view, that just doesn't work. The cost of doing that is several orders of magnitude greater than upgrading even a really, really poorly maintained line. And as a result, even though there have been thousands of miles that have been put into this sort of status of what's called rail banking on a national level, less than 100 have actually been reconverted to rail. There's also, even though legally somebody would have that right, politically it becomes difficult, because if the trail's been there a few years, people who have used the trail will very often come in and say, no, we don't want the trail taken out. Additionally, if that's going to be the situation, what you have is you have a situation where the public has paid the money for a trail, and then the trail goes away. So Train Riders Northeast is not against trails. What we are saying is that the trail should be built alongside the rail. Some places that's difficult, and it does certainly cost more than just taking the rails away and putting a trail in there. But what that does is it preserves the potential economic benefits of future rail use on the line, which would disappear if the trail was put in place. The other thing is I did send each of you a over lengthy memo about this by email. So most of what I'm saying here is in there. If you have passenger rail or freight rail, obviously there's an economic benefit. Obviously, particularly with freight, you have businesses that will come and will use that, or businesses that are there that will use that. For passenger rail, there is substantial economic benefit. For example, as far back as 2005, an MDOT study found that more than $15 million of annual business sales in Maine and New Hampshire could be attributed to the then 3-year-old Downeaster service, along with over 200 jobs and nearly $5 million in wages, increasing to over $53 million per year by 2015 as projected. Development near the stations along the Downeaster line has been fantastic. In Brunswick, you have the Brunswick Station area. You not only have the Brunswick Station building itself, but you also have apartments and housing going up nearby as a result of the station being there. In Saco, some of the mills near the station have been rehabbed after several years of unsuccessful efforts to do so, but now that with the station there, they've successfully happened. Just right now, if you go down to Dover, New Hampshire, there is actually a building going up with 40 residential units, and we kind of worry about it because it's close enough to the tracks that you kind of wonder whether you could reach out and touch the building. But it's there because of the tracks and because of the transportation that possibilities that are offered there. Now, what about these shippers? Well, MDOT never went out and asked or made any effort to gauge potential shippers' interest on this line before the RUAC, during the RUAC process, anything like that. In fact, basically their position has been, nobody's come up here and asked us about that, and therefore there can't be any interest. Well, that's simply not true. If you looked at people who are trying to run a freight line, they have to go out and they have to sell the freight line. They have to show the people along the line or potential people coming into the line that what they're offering is cheaper and has other benefits above and beyond the type of shipping that might be an alternative, such as, in most instances, trucking. When the RUAC was formed, MDOT goes out and hires somebody to do a study of each line that's subject to a RUAC. What they do is they put various limitations on what they expect those people to do. And so it was here. The analysis that was done ignores many of the potential economic impacts of either freight or passenger rail users. For example, the analysis that was done indicated that a trail user would spend an average of $118 for food, lodging, and equipment each day that they use the trail, resulting in spending of $3.5 to $5.3 million annually. That same analysis, however, includes only what rail passengers might spend on the train itself, resulting in a spending of $114,000 to $130,000 annually. Apparently, trail users get to eat, sleep, and buy things whether or not they are on the trail, while rail passengers only do those things while they're on the train. Well, that's not very realistic. And in fact, it looks like the people who are using the Downeaster spend an average of about $200 and I think it's $12 a day that they're here. At that rate, if it would only take, well, even at a lower rate, it would only take 10 non-commuter passengers a day to spend $100 per day at their destination to add $365,000 in localized spending annually to the figures used by the analysis, and that's a very low estimate. There was also a discrepancy in the analysis regarding increased values of homes and the number of additional residential units that might be created on the line. Those were very low in the study. In addition to that, another study that was done but for MDOT as part of the RUAC process found that it would cost $274 million to upgrade the rail line between Portland, Boston, and Auburn for passenger rail service. But what that ignores is two things. First of all, that included about $60 million for what's known as PTC, positive train control, which is a safety measure that's encouraged throughout the United States, but is only required once you get more than 6 round trips a day of passenger service. So there's no indication that that would be required at all. In addition, another $60 million is for the portion of the line that would have to be improved between the B&M Baked Bean Factory and former B&M Baked Bean Factory in Portland, soon to be the Rue Institute, and the downtown waterfront area. That would include putting in a new trestle for, at one point, that was a $10 million project. I'm sure that's more like $20 million, but there's no reason you have to do that. You could start at the Rue Center, and in fact, given the number of people that will be using that, there is some great reason not to necessarily start in Portland. Furthermore, there is actually someone who actually built a parking lot along the line at an earlier point in time when it looked like there was going to be some potential passenger use there. So there's parking along the line, and there is no need to go across there. So what we're talking about, it's not cheap even then. It's $154 million for a passenger rail service. But you're not looking at having to do that all at once, particularly if you do it for freight. You can do it incrementally. And in fact, that's what's being offered by Conway Scenic on the Mountain Division. They're saying, well, we don't have to spend the whole amount right now. We can start with just the first section and add another section and add another section. And we'll do that as money becomes available. Well, that's what could be happening here. And in addition to that, that's probably what's going to be happening with the trail. I know on the Mountain Division, they have a trail that they're going to be, that MDOT is scheduled to be putting in, but it's going to be happening over years and years. And the first section will only include the northernmost part of that trail. So it doesn't have to be all done at once. The study also estimated the cost of an interim trail at $28.4 to $35.8 million. Well, again, going back to the Mountain Division estimated it would cost approximately $20 million to build the trail along that line. And that was at the RUAC, that was a result of all the studies done at the RUAC level. What has more recently come out of MDOT is a cost of $35 million. So there is, what happens is at the RUAC level, it's all preliminary figures, and there's no assurance that it's going to be anywhere near the cost that's set forth in the initial study. Why should Auburn care? Well, there is a parallel line, obviously. That's the CSX line. And that certainly has a marked impact upon some types of freight. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there couldn't be freight, wouldn't be demand for freight, and wouldn't be demand for freight from people who might otherwise come into the area, but won't if they can't easily get rail service. The other part of this is on the passenger side, and again, most of these things are things I think I mentioned in my previous testimony, is that the other line there is owned by CSX. CSX only has to let Amtrak onto its line. It does not have to let anyone else on for any sort of passenger rail service, and that's by federal law. And CSX has shown a propensity to be anti-passenger service where it can get away with that in other portions of the country. There's very little chance that they would allow anything other than an Amtrak service on what's their main line in Maine. So if anyone wanted commuter service, for example, or light rail, there would be little to no possibility of that happening if this line is torn up. So as a result of that, there is a good reason for Auburn to be concerned about this. All around this. And then finally, there is the cost of maintenance. Who will bear that cost? Well, I can tell you that on the Mountain Division, the MDOT has made it quite clear they're not going to pay for maintenance. They will search out funds for construction, but they will not pay for maintenance. Who will then? Well, it will either be the municipalities along the line, or it will be at a private group, or probably a nonprofit, a snowmobile group, or some sort of trail group that would bear the cost of that. What they have been saying there is that the cost is $1,000 to $3,000, which in this case is not a substantial amount for this city, because not much of this line is that would be ripped up would be in this city. But it does indicate that there is some cost that will be assessed, and which ultimately might become the responsibility of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cole.
Thank you, I appreciate it, and I appreciate everyone. I'm Peter Cole from Topsom, Maine. I am in Maine Rail Group. I also work with Bruce on the Train Riders Association as a volunteer at the Brunswick station in the evenings. This is a very big decision, and I know it's a no-win position for all of you. I've been in these same positions. But basically, what I want to talk about is we don't know the future. But we do know that Maine is going to be growing, and the population pressure is here, and it's going to continue growing. We know we need more housing. We know that in the past, the housing is sprawled out over the land. I know someone that lives in Auburn right now, couldn't find a place, and has moved to Mechanicsville and commutes to Topsom, actually to Brunswick. So we don't know the future, but we're spreading ourselves out instead of taking advantage of a transit system that could build up the city. I agree with everything that was said about trails. They're wonderful things, but think about what you're tearing out if you tear out the tracks and don't go rail with trail. Rail is the most efficient system to move people. Steel wheels on steel rails take the least amount of energy of any system known to mankind. And right now, the energy demand is growing. We've had a car-centric development that's experiment for the last 70, 80 years. And what's happened is we've wiped out our downtowns. We worked hard, we built parking structures, we've done things. But what have we done? We've ended up sprawling out further and further. Housing costs rise because of the parking costs, the requirements of having parking spaces in buildings, and they result in sprawl and dead-end suburbs. The cost for the city, and you know this and I know this, is tremendous for maintaining the roads. And it's very hard to continue maintaining it. So what are we starting to look at? We're starting to look at alternatives to supplement the cars that we have. And one of them is obviously active transportation, bikes, scooters, electric bikes, walking, and they're perfect for smaller communities, for last mile transportation. We've also talked about recreational trails, and that is good if we can keep our open areas. But as we keep sprawling out, we lose our open areas. More public land is lost as we keep spreading out the sprawl. Rails with trails are great, but not if you wipe out the benefits of public transit. The state has already built rails with trails in Wyndham, in Freiburg, in Hollowell, and even in Lisbon. Last year I traveled to California, and there was a route that's up north, not in a highly populated area, and they have put in a rail with a trail. And what I watched when I rode the 30 miles or so it was a diesel motor unit, so it was a smaller train. And I watched the kids would bicycle, and then they'd jump on the train, and they'd go several exits, and then they'd go off into the new city to visit their friends. All of this going on. And I see the same thing going on in Brunswick. I see people getting on with their bicycles onto the Downeaster. They bicycled up from Portland. They take the train back down. I've seen people come up to Brunswick to start off on a long distance bicycle ride. And guess what? They're shopping. They're spending money in Brunswick. Interesting, when I was talking to the person at the Conway Scenic, there's a Appalachian Trail store. Guess what? It is only open when the train makes the stop at Fabian. Otherwise, it's closed because the people on the trail don't buy stuff. So it's very interesting, the economic development that's going along. Bruce has already talked about the long distance, the CSX, and that was brought up. Well, there's already a rail line, but it's Amtrak. Long distance, ideally, would be going from Portland, Lewiston, Auburn, Waterville, and then on up to Bangor and the USM campus in Orono. But it's limited. They're not going to want frequent commuter service. It would be great for tourism going up to northern Maine. People wouldn't have to drive up the East Coast on the interstates. But it's not going to solve the local transit issues of going from Auburn to Portland or other places around. The other night, there are 3 buses a day that go from Brunswick to Lewiston and end in Auburn. The poor girl came in. She had ridden the Breeze, and the Breeze was late because it was running on the city. Got off at the Brunswick station. She goes, I missed the last bus. Fortunately, I'm there for the 5:45 southbound, and I was able to explain to her that she could take the train back down to Portland, get off there at the Portland Transit Center, and then take the new lap bus out here to Auburn. But those are the connections that we need to be creating and we need to be able to have in the future, because the workers that we have are doing, our essential workers are the ones that need transit. The statistic is 30% of housing in your budget, 30% goes to housing and 15% goes to transportation. Well, if we don't have transportation and housing goes up, they can't make it. So we need to be offering some options. If you're talking about a rapid bus transit system, which is kind of what DOT was trying to talk you into with a lap bus, well, you need a dedicated right-of-way. Otherwise, they get stuck in the same traffic everybody else gets stuck in. You need platforms for rapid loading and ease of those walking issues or bicycles getting on. You need a remote fare system. Well, by the time you've put all of that in, you might as well put in a light rail that's more efficient, using power that isn't being wasted trying to start and stop a diesel bus all the time. The RUAC had a small picture. They looked at small individual lines. They looked at smaller communities. They didn't look at the whole state of Maine and the transit system that needs to be here. If you tear out the tracks on this line, what about the economic development that you've been fighting so hard for around the airport zone? As Bruce said, competition helps with transit. A smaller rail line is going to go after the business that CSX is not going to go after. Transit-oriented development, that's the new term out there. Start putting in a system of walkways, bikeways in your town that then leads to apartment building or a multi-unit building that's located near the transit bus, train station, bus system. You start getting a true picture of transportation going along. You can see it around the stations of both Saco and Brunswick. Both of those stations have seen tremendous increases. And transit-oriented commerce, you start putting local businesses around the train stations. They have people walking by, they have people there, small stores opening around the stations, attracting economic growth. Look at what's happened down at Portland's Thompson's Point. And it's connections between towns. People work and live in different communities. It would be nice if everybody just stayed in the same community. When my father was growing up in Standish, Maine, back in the 1940s, yeah, everybody was there. But that's not the case anymore. People are commuting to get to their jobs, and we know we have a labor shortage. Rails and trails cost more. Trails cost over $1 million a mile. Then, when it is obvious that options are needed, do we tear out the trails? That was the discussion we've already had. And one of the trail people said, well, yeah, but once we build the bicycle trails, we never have to worry about it. Well, sadly, that's true. We use the term interim, but even a lot of the people in the Bicycle Coalition don't believe it'll ever come back. So I say build it right the first time. Do it in sections. You can do a rail with a trail. They've done it in many places already in Maine. We can do it here in Auburn. Allow for options, allow for the future. Thank you.
I'm assuming, is it correct that you're from St. Lawrence and Atlantic? Yeah, your name's, can you push the button? Your name, sir?
Charles Hunter.
Yeah, would you like to make a few comments?
Sure. Good evening. So Charles Hunter, I'm Assistant Vice President, Government Affairs for Genesee and Wyoming. We own the St. Lawrence Atlantic Railroad, former operator of the line. Up until recently, we had an active agreement with Maine DOT to resume service should it be needed for freight rail. And even though the agreement is expired, we still have rights from the original sale to resume freight service should Maine DOT seek a freight operator or the railroad seek to operate it. What would complicate that is a lot of things that were just said by these two gentlemen. Once the track and the railroad infrastructure is gone, it is extremely expensive to replace. I've been around this railroad for about 35 years, so I've seen a lot of changes with it. If freight rail were to return, or even passenger rail for that matter, it would not likely return like that. It would come back and perhaps you'd have one customer, maybe two customers that would need service. That would not trigger enough investment to even do the project. It's unlikely that you would have a customer that wanted to locate on this line that was such a large customer that you could raise the funds necessary to put the track back in its entirety. So once the track's gone, that really changes the mechanics, the financial ability for the line to resume service at a future date. A lot of talk tonight about the future and what's unknown of the future. I mean, the railroad has been there for over 100 years. Primarily, it was built to serve the ports of Portland, shipping grain out, Canadian grain to be specific. All of that is, as you well know, long since changed. So that's an example of just because it was built for something doesn't mean that it's going to always be used for that purpose. And by taking away the rail infrastructure, you are taking away the future use of this railroad, whatever that may be. We don't know what it would be 100 years from now, or probably even 10 years from now. We're in a lot of different markets. I can tell you that Northeast and Midwest, we're seeing changes in the market, waste shipments, people seeking to move waste and recyclables out of their region to other regions for proper disposal. We're seeing changes in the energy market of how energy moves into the region, particularly for heating fuels. So things do change, and I would hate to see the ability to change in the future impacted with removal of the track.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the council? So I have a number of follow-up questions. I guess I'll start with Mr. Hunter. Let me make a general statement first. There's been a lot of discussion about broad-based public transportation, which really is not within the scope of what the council is considering here. What the council is considering relative to an interim trail, supporting an interim trail recommendation is the line that goes from Danville to North Yarmouth, and then from North Yarmouth, as has been pointed out by Mr. Sleeper, to the old B&M Baked Bean Factory. The crossing across the entrance to Back Bay is no longer functional, but if it was, that track would continue across the east end and end up down by Commercial Street where the Grand Trunk terminal used to be. So I have a few questions about that. So Mr. Hunter, as I understand it, 10 or 11 years ago, St. Lawrence and Atlantic Railway discontinued operations on this line. Is that correct?
That's correct. The last customer was B&M Baked Beans.
Right, and subsequent to that, in lieu of abandonment, the state of Maine bought the right-of-way from St. Lawrence and Atlantic, correct?
Correct.
And does St. Lawrence and Atlantic today have any future plans that for customers along this rail between Danville Junction and Yarmouth, or Danville Junction and to where the Rue Institute is going to be?
That's a tough one. There are no customers' plans as of today. Have a short answer, but I also go back to earlier, we do not know what the future could bring.
Right.
Rail track is very different from a highway. There's only so much railroad track. It's not like a trucking terminal or a warehouse where you can build a roadway into your driveway. It's very different.
Yeah, so would it be fair to say that if St. Lawrence and Atlantic thought there was a near-term business case to be made to run freight across this section of rail, they would not have discontinued this rail line and sold it to the state?
At the time, there was no active customers, but as I previously mentioned, the agreement with the state allows resumption of rail freight service by our company should that need arise.
Yeah, my understanding from discussion with the deputy commissioner and the directors that run the rail division for the state is that now that the state owns this, pursuant to the Rail Preservation Act, any operator who had a business case to run freight across that line could notify DOT of that, and they would be required by law to allow the resumption of rail service. Is that correct?
I'm not an expert on that type of information, so I'm not sure.
Okay, so I don't know about other council members, but having been in this area quite frequently, it's a real stretch, at least for me personally, to understand where the large-scale industrial development is going to be along this corridor, given the existing zoning and the residential development in this area and the discontinuation of service for a number of years. I'm a little confused, and perhaps Mr. Sleeper or Mr. Cole can help with this. I'm a little confused about the discussion here relative to passenger rail. So it's my understanding that today, the Amtrak Down Easter runs across CSX lines, and that's coordinated with CSX. Is that correct? And if Amtrak was going to extend passenger service to Lewiston and Auburn, that could be extended along the existing CSX, active CSX line, and that CSX would be required by federal law to coordinate those schedules with Amtrak. Is that correct?
Well, that's correct. They'd have to let them use the tracks, but Amtrak almost always is looking for an intercity type of situation. We're not talking commuter rail. We're talking
Yeah, I understand
more
that,
long
but
distance.
specific to Amtrak, nothing would need to be done to the rail corridor that's at discussion here tonight in order for Amtrak to extend beyond Portland, go through Lewiston and Auburn, and points beyond that. There's
wouldn't-
existing rail with existing capacity to do that.
It's existing rail. I'm not sure. There's different levels of rail.
Sure.
And I don't know what level that line is up to. If it's up to, class 3, 60 miles per hour for
Sure.
passenger rail,
Yeah.
fine. Class 4, which gets up to, 79 would be even better, which is what we have now. But I don't know what level
Yeah,
they're
so
at.
my question wasn't really, or observation wasn't really about the class of rail and whether additional work would be done.
Yeah.
It's, there is no need to restore the rail corridor here, the old, the Berlin subdivision, the old SLA line, in order for Amtrak to get from Portland to Auburn, correct? Go ahead, Mr. Cole.
You're right, and that's what I exactly stated for that long distance. But you yourself talked about all the housing that's going in, and I know you're saying that Auburn doesn't care about transit, but
Yeah.
ultimately,
Yeah,
it's going to need to for public transit if you want to make a walking, livable city here.
Sure, I'm not, I have never said Auburn's not interested in transit, quite the opposite. But relative to this rail, so it seems to me that there's no known future use of this corridor for freight, and if it was, it would go to North Yarmouth and it could make connection with the CSX, or it could go down to where the Rue Institute's going to be at a dead end. The MDOT has been very clear that they won't be restoring the crossing across Back Bay for freight traffic, that's not going to happen. So if that's the situation with freight, and for Amtrak, there's an existing corridor they could run on, we only have, on the CSX line today, 4 trains a day, right? A train goes back and forth to Waterville, and a train goes back and forth to Rumford. So there's certainly capacity on that line to run a passenger service such as Amtrak. When it comes to light rail, it seems that what you're saying is that this line could be used for light rail. I assume you're talking about something like the Green Line trolley cars on the MBTA in Boston, right? Something like that runs on the surface. We're not talking about subway cars, and we're not talking about commuter rail service such as the MBTA runs with the Purple Line cars.
Probably not quite at the level of the above ground MBTA lines. It would be the cars would be more they would be more like the intercity cars as far as passenger rail goes. They would be lighter weight than the full Amtrak stuff. Most likely they'd be what are known as DMUs, which are diesel cars individual cars have their own power and they get linked together and whatever.
So my understanding, and you can correct me if you have a different understanding, my understanding from the deputy commissioner at DOT is light rail could only run on this line up to the Auburn-New Gloucester line. Because once you get to the Auburn-New Gloucester line, that last bit into the Danville Junction is controlled by CSX. And under the federal regulations, you cannot run light commuter rail on the same track as CSX lines without them stopping freight traffic. So if we had something like the equivalent of the lap bus, which runs 16 or 17 hours a day, in effect, we'd be asking CSX to suspend freight operations for 16 or 17 hours a day so we could run light rail from a fixed point in Portland. Potentially, they could cross Back Bay and go into the Ocean Gateway downtown, potentially. You could run light rail, but if you did, it would stop at the New Gloucester Auburn line and could not extend into Auburn itself. So do you have a different understanding of that than MDOT does?
I do have a bit of a different understanding of that. Yeah, if you have 16 hours of service a day, then yeah, you've got a problem because you can't have light rail and heavy rail running at the same time on the line. They'd have to be at what they call a temporal differentiation between the two. So yes, during the times that the light rail was running, if it had to go across CSX-owned lines, then CSX would not be able to have the freight rail running at the same time. If there's only 4 runs a day, it would seem to me that that could be arranged. If it gets to, in the future, it might get to be a lot more as far on the freight side on CSX lines. Would CSX allow that? Again, I don't think so. I think, and I'll be very consistent, I don't think CSX is going to allow light rail on any of its lines. But I'm not entirely sure where, who owns what from Danville Junction north. I mean, it wasn't just. I mean, there are 2 lines coming out of there too.
Well, sure. I mean, once you get to Danville Junction, you can get on the St. Lawrence and Atlantic. It goes all the way up to Montreal. You can go continue on in Maine across the CSX lines. So I guess my point is that this notion that you could just run light rail into Lewiston, Auburn, go through Danville Junction, come up, go across to, it isn't possible because you can't get into Auburn with light rail with the current federal safety regulations.
You can do an over-under to cross the main line as well. I mean, we're talking future, and that's what I keep going back to is options of the future. Sure. And there are many places in the country where the one rail goes over the other rail, and sometimes it's 2 freight lines are going over each other as well, and that's not an impossibility. And the DMUs that he was talking about are capable of running on main line as long as, for example, the Atlantic line, it could be that would be an income for them because they would be the host railroad that could then host the service and allow it to operate. You're absolutely right about the long distance intercity. Amtrak is run through NEPRA, that's the contract, that's through the state. And the Amtrak system is only looking at intercity long distance routes. We're talking the future, and I have seen the future come far faster than I ever believed and changing of the needs. And that's what I'm saying is keep options on the table. That's why I say rail with trail. We've done it in this state. We
Right.
can continue to do it in this state.
So if I can interrupt you there, having conversations with MDOT, the deputy commissioner has been very clear in the conversations, myself and the assistant city manager, that if the recommendation is rail with trail, we'll get no money for either. That they don't see that as a viable alternative. That's not going to get built. So it seems to me, when I look at this, we're certainly very interested in inner city public transportation, which is why we are fully supporting the lap bus. But let's talk about, for the council, some of the numbers here about the money would need to be spent. So there's already been a bit of discussion about this, but to run rail across this line, existing line, the infrastructure upgrades would cost between $189 million and $254 million. For the lap bus, it's zero. Vehicle cost, $75 million to $95 million. This is to buy the bus or buy the train. $75 million to $95 million vehicle cost for trains. $1.6 million for the bus. That investment's been made by DOT. Capital, so the total capital cost is $264 to $349 million on this line to restore rail. The capital cost is $1.6 million for the bus. The annual operating and maintenance cost, $15 to $20 million for the rail. $850,000 to $1.2 million for the bus. And both would require subsidies, as most public transportation does. $7.5 million to $9.5 million per year for the rail, $850,000 to $1.2 million for the bus. So my point is not that we should cut off any future rail. The Rail Preservation Act has an absolute guarantee that if there is a viable rail operation, that will take precedent. My point is that if we want to establish inner city transportation, public transportation, commuter type, that the lap bus is what we should be looking at. The state has analyzed the potential ridership. It's very clear that at the ridership level we're talking about for rail on this track, for passenger rail, the state will not qualify for any federal subsidies. Even if the expected ridership numbers doubled, they would still not qualify for any federal subsidies. The advantage to the bus is it's way less expensive and it's way more flexible. The train goes from point A to point B. The bus, we can change routes much more easily. I think we should preserve the rail bed, but I think that Auburn's and the residents of the surrounding towns should benefit from this asset in the interim period, because no one's come forth with any viable plan at this point to show that there's any realistic plan to restore rail on this line. Councilor Cowan, I think you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple comments and a couple questions. I've lived in Auburn since 2000. I've commuted to Portland either 5 days a week, now currently 3 days a week for 24 years. I have, as I think about the stages in my life and my family's life, if a rail had been an option 24 years ago, I probably wouldn't have used it all that much, because I needed the flexibility to get home if I needed to take care of my children and my wife couldn't get out of work. I carpooled, and that was much more flexible. That worked a lot easier. That was a great deal. I carpooled for 20 years. And that provided the flexibility as well as the cost savings. My understanding, and I don't remember the number of times, but my understanding is that there was attempts to have a van similar to how it would go from the Portland area up to Augusta, to go from Auburn down to Portland, and it failed more than once. because there wasn't the demand. Now, I know that you guys are looking at the future. I want to be looking at the future as well. One of the unknown questions I have, I just don't, right now, even in the next 10 years, am not seeing the demand for a light rail passenger line from Auburn to Portland. I think there are alternatives, like a bus. There's flexibility, but I also have to wonder, the reality is I only go to Portland 2 days a week now because I work remote. And so that possibility is part of the future, and that algorithm, that makes me suspect that we can really do much with that. I'd love your thoughts on that. The other thing that I would appreciate some help with it, I mean, because this is phenomenal data that you've provided, Mr. Sleeper, but I don't see any data in here about what the demand is, what even the current demand is, what is the future demand in 10, 15 years for a passenger rail, and especially if we could put in use Amtrak. Now, I would have loved some clarification, because I understand that Amtrak is interested in longer term. They're not interested in just commuting from Auburn to Portland. But to me, there's an advantage if there was an extension of Amtrak from Auburn to Portland, and some people could get off in Portland, but others, like me, would be interested in going to Boston. I'd rather have that option, and I'd love to understand, is there a hesitation for Amtrak to just come to Auburn where they need more than one stop beyond Portland, or is it already just an extension to inner city? So I would appreciate some better understanding on how that works.
I'll let Bruce also answer it, but right now, because of the layover facility in Brunswick, to split the service wouldn't be worth it just to come to Auburn, and they would be looking at a longer distance haul. And right now, in the state of Maine, we have the 3 largest cities, Portland, Lewis, and Auburn, if you take their group, and then Bangor is sitting up there all by itself, and that would be the logical haul all the way up. But you're not going to be looking, probably, because they're going to need to double track more line going down to Boston. Ultimately, if you run more and more services, the PTC is supposed to come online, I believe, in February, which will allow from Brunswick to Boston. I don't believe at this point it's active up this way, and it would have to be activated all the way up. And you'd also have to bring the whole line up to probably a class 5 to get the 79 that you've got on the rest of the run. So I don't think it would be a short haul situation. And I understand what you're saying about, the costs. And I just have seen myself how fast areas grow. I mean, I go back to where I grew up, and it was like, all farmland, and now it's all suburbs. So it does grow faster than we think.
Certainly, I agree with what Peter just said. As far as demand goes, again, it's a question for the future. You're right. Several studies have shown that MDOT has done have shown that there hasn't been a sufficient demand for the type of commuter rail that we're talking about. The problem is, again, once it's gone, and it's the only line that really could handle the commuter rails. As far as having to stop at Danville Junction and maybe go no further, perhaps a shuttle bus, or something else. But today, I'm not here to tell you that today it's going to happen. As far as the cost, you've also got to look at the cost of the trail, and where's that money coming from? Right now, as far as I know, there is no set. What do I do here? Finger wore out. Thank you. I pay him to do this. Right now, as far as I know, there's no set place to get the money for even the Mountain Division. They are looking, and they've got a couple of potential things, but nothing. And yet, the decision has already been made to rip up the rail there. And we're working to reverse that, but it's still there. So I think the money side of things, yes, it's more for the trail with rail. It's more for the train itself, but it's It's something that would have much more capacity to provide. I mean, the trail does almost nothing for commuters. You're not going to be seeing people biking, there'll be some, but there won't be many people biking down from Auburn to Portland or vice versa. The other thing is you were indicating you didn't think that there was a whole lot of commuter demand from Lewiston down to Portland. I'd say I know a lot of people in Portland who go up to Lewiston to work. So there's that as well. Do I think that that's enough today to go out and spend $100 million on the line? I don't know. But in the future, things are going to be changing. I mean, Portland has, right now, has no housing for anybody. Where are they going to go? They're going to go outside of Portland. I don't know quite what the situation is here, but I bet it's not much different. And having a commuter line down to Portland would make this a more attractive place for people to come to and live if they wanted to go to Portland occasionally or if they commuted down. One final thing. Sorry about that. One final thing is that you talk about the change in how many times people go into work a week, and yeah, that's a big change. I mean, before COVID, the Downeaster had like 20% or more of its ridership were pass holders, which are mostly commuters. Now they're down to about 8%. But what they're seeing is that other people are filling up those seats. And in fact, they had a record year last year.
And I'd just add that that's true across the whole country. And, we've seen several companies now that are demanding that people do come in 5 days a week. And you're also seeing the essential workers. And those are the ones that have to be there. They can't work remotely.
Councilor Connell.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and thank you for the clarification on Amtrak. I just, yes, I agree. There are people that are commuting both directions. But when I look at the costs and the relative to a bus line, when we also have demands for getting people from our outlying rural areas into Lewiston, Auburn, and we have to be thinking about both, how we're going to spread our limited dollars. What you're asking me to consider, if at least as I'm digesting it, is that this section of track is largely what we would probably be considering for the future is a commuter rail. I'm having a hard time with that because it's well, I hear what you're saying about leaving it there in case there's a need. I think your idea, Mr. Sleeper, it's an intuitive, the idea of having it end at the Rue Institute is a creative one. But as a commuter, I would never use it because I need to get to downtown. And that means I have to take a shuttle bus from Auburn to Danville Junction, if that's the case, down to Rue Institute and then get on another bus. I mean, it's inconvenient. And, the people I'm seeing move into my neighborhood are young families. And if they're commuting, they need that flexibility. I hear what you're saying, Mr. Cole, about the essential workers, but essential workers are going to BIW as well. I mean, and there's a van that's parked, and people get on that van and they go. So I just don't know that we have the demand just to go partway into Portland. And so I appreciate where you're coming, but if there's not demand right now, I'm having a hard time with it. So.
Just as a point of clarification for something Mr. Sleeper brought up, I think it's important for the council to understand the process that's going to go forward here. So the Commissioner of the Department of Transportation will be bringing forth the bill based on the action by the RUAC for consideration by the legislature. Should the legislature adopt the interim trail approach, the next step of that is simply the design element, right, in which they would have to appropriate the funds to do that. Once the design element's done, they would have to appropriate money for the trail. So Mr. Sleeper is correct. It's not like the state's already appropriated the money for this, but what is before the council, or what will be before the council in 2 weeks, when the resolve comes back before you, is whether to support that or not, in effect, to support the recommendation and the bill that's going to be forthcoming to the legislature. The other point I would make, because this keeps getting lost, any light rail, commuter rail, will stop, according to MDOT, at the Auburn, New Gloucester line. It won't go to Danville Junction, it won't come downtown Auburn, it won't go to Lewiston, because then you are on CSX track, and the federal safety regulations will not allow those concurrent operations. So when I look at this, I'm all for public transit, but when I look at this, I say, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to build a station at the New Gloucester Auburn line and run buses or something out there? If that's the case, why don't people just get on one of the 4 stops in Lewiston, Auburn on the bus and go to Portland, which is available now? So other thoughts, Council Platt?
Thank you. Tim, I appreciate your comments about demand, because that's kind of what I was thinking. But I don't want to ask you guys specifics about what's the demand today, what's going to be tomorrow. I know you're not here to answer those questions. I'm trying to picture a future that is being described, a future with light rail, if it's possible. So I guess my question is, off the top of your head, either anecdotally or something I can go home and look up online, are there examples of other cities? And let's fast forward 20 years. Let's say Lewiston, Auburn has 100,000 people. Let's say, I think Portland proper has like 100,000, Greater Portland's 400, 500. Let's say that doubles, or not doubles, but let's say 20 years from now, are there examples of, and I'm going to be very clear, non-Amtrak owned light rail in municipal centers with, 400, 500,000 people? I haven't seen too many. I've been to Vermont, and I know there's an Amtrak up there. I've been to Seattle, and I've ridden to Snohomish. I think that's a non-Amtrak, but we're talking millions of people. Are there examples of this pipe dream that we're hoping for? Because that would help me better understand what we're holding out for. My hunch is that these things don't exist. I understand the economics of Maine. I understand how many people live here, how many tourists we have. I understand the price of a train ticket. I know that multiple bus systems have failed because of demand here. So I guess my question is let's fast forward 20 years. Does this even work? My hunch is it doesn't, but I'd love to.
I was going to
more.
say, if you go on the, it's the Smart Transit, and it goes from, I'm trying to remember the 2 towns that it ties into, but it's 2 counties in northern California, north of San Francisco. The population density is not really high there, and they have done the rail with trail, and they're running the rail diesel units and running that system right there, and they're going up to Cloverdale, which is extremely small population at this point in time. And it is existing in other places. That just happens to be the one place I knew, because we happened to end up there last year for a reason. But I'm sure there's some other places as well that are using the smaller ones. And I know some places they do use, the rapid bus transportation that I was talking about, but it's not just, we'll go down a street and get caught up in the same traffic everybody else does. And so there's another option, and they can use the rail beds. And I know that that's been done as well. I mean, I don't like seeing it because they tear out the rails and you don't have the efficiency. But it is an interim type of solution that you could look at until your density grows. But I think when you're talking just bus, they don't go, part of it is they're not running frequently, they're not loading quickly. You have those other issues if they're not properly designed, and they're designed to fail, and that's basically what we have in their last resorts for people. And that's why, as you said, for childcare and so on and so forth, you've got to have the frequency. You have to have, more common, and
Any other?
And I
Council Whiting?
unfortunately have nothing to add to that, because I'm not aware. Most of my work's with the Amtrak service, so I don't have specific examples for you.
Council Whiting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did some back-of-the-napkin calculations based on Mr. Sleeper's numbers, and so roughly 150 million as opposed to your numbers if you took the strip-down improvement to restore the rails. If you took the service area or a standard metropolitan statistical area up here, round numbers 100,000, so that's about $1,500 a person. If you look at the trail option, that's about $250 a person. And the state just passed, what, an $80 million bond issue for trails? So I don't know if you'd want to comment on that.
It's a 30 million bond, and obviously there are a lot of, it opens it up, not just, it opens it up a certain percentage, allow for ATV vehicles, and it's overall the entire state. And, you know, you've got your East Coast Greenway, which has still not been finished yet. So a lot of those issues that come up, and then the cities would be expected to, you know, pay for parking lots and so on. And I think of the Brunswick one, for example, that runs along the river there. And there is a parking lot at both ends of it. And the good part with that is that there's good visibility. It goes along Route 1 towards Bath. But, you know, that's an issue if you're out in the more lonely areas. And I see people driving their bicycles there, which kind of doesn't work for the climate. That's my concern.
Other questions or comments from the council? Colin?
No, I appreciate all the responses, and I actually love the Downeaster and love to go down to Boston. I'm just really struggling to say, is this financially a good option or the best option? So appreciate all your time and comments.
And I just wanted to say thank you, because I know these are hard decisions, and we're asking to look to the future and protect that. And I know that, you know, you're looking at the interim. I mean, I won't be around to see this service, but, you know, some of you might be.
Council Wiseman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My kind of thoughts on this is, what is the future going to hold? You know, the Turnpike was only 2 lanes. Now it's going to 3 lanes. Population's increasing. We know that that's a lot of money and investment. You know, what was the population of Auburn back in 1870? You know, it's expanded completely. We don't know where it's going to go. I don't support just ripping up the rail. I love walking trails. I think that's important. I would like to see more communication with the state, because of your comments, Mr. Mayor, about they're not supportive if it's a rail with trail. There wouldn't be any money in that. I think that's kind of a horrible way to just say we're not going to have any discussion about it. I think there should be discussion about rails with trails and that option, because as I'm sorry I forgot your name, but Charles, thank you. You know, your comments, and once the rail's out, it's very hard to get it back in. And you know, what business is going to sit there and dump a bunch of money in there for, if we're going to expand the industrial zone, and we're looking into those options of what we're going to do with rail around the airport. And if there is something that can be done, and we're going to rip out rail, and there is going to be businesses that are going to invest in Auburn, but they're hearing we're going to rip out rail, that could use that. That could be an issue, and that's my concern. I'm not a fan of just ripping out the rail. There is a future. I may not be around to see it. My son may be. It may be his grandson or granddaughter, but you know, I think just that's kind of where I'm at this point. Thank you.
Just a few clarifications. The rail corridor we're talking about doesn't come anywhere near the airport. It has nothing to do with the airport, doesn't come near the intermodal, doesn't come past Danville Junction. The other thing I would point out is there's been a lot of discussion about population growth. So I talked to the state economist office. So here's what they say. They say that Portland, Bangor, Lewiston, South Portland, the 4 largest cities, their projections through 2040 will lose population. The only city in the top 5 that will gain is Auburn. Scarborough, South Portland will actually lose and go below us. Scarborough will come up above. The question I would have to people to think about is, if light commuter rail is such an attractive option, why is it not being considered to the western and southern suburbs of Portland? There is more population there. I grew up in the Portland area. There was nothing in Gorham. There was nothing in Windham. Windham is almost the size of South Portland and Auburn at this point, and Gorham is not far behind. There's more population than in the Lewiston, Auburn area that could be serviced by commuter rail. But what's the discussion? There's no discussion about commuter rail going out there. They're talking about building a turnpike spur because they cannot justify the demand for commuter rail. If you can't justify commuter rail going to the western and southern suburbs of Portland, I just don't see how you justify thinking you're going to have commuter rail coming to Auburn. The whole Lewiston, Auburn area has 100,000 general population. The state economist says in 2040, it's going to be the same. So it's, you know, if we were saying we're going to grow double our size and Portland's going to have 700,000 people, it might be a different conversation. But the state has reviewed this, studied this multiple times, and determined not only is there no business case for rail, there's no business case for inner-city bus. But for the graciousness of Maine DOT to run this pilot to see if the communities in the area can generate enough of an adoption rate to justify even inner-city bus at the relatively low cost. I don't see how there's any expectation you're going to run commuter rail that has to stop at the New Gloucester line. Other thoughts by the council? Councilor Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too am not ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't want to see the tracks at this point in time being ripped up. We don't know what 10 years, 5 years, or even 20 years is going to be. By then they may be making, I don't even know what it costs today to run a train to go, I don't know how much it costs per mile. In the future, they may be making trains that are lighter, not quite so big, and will take even less type of fuel to get from point A to point B. Even if we don't go to other, even if it's almost a dead, so to speak, line, what's to say businesses could not develop around the line, and they use that train to get to the different new businesses, tourist things, anything that may bring even more population or businesses to Auburn and any other municipality that this line touches. I mean, the possibility is endless.
Other questions or comments from the council? No, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming and participating with us tonight.
Thank you very much, Mayor Herman.
The council work session will be adjourned. We'll reconvene at 7 o'clock for the council meeting. You want to spend $400 million? pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If we could have the councilors introduce themselves, starting with Councilor Gary.
Good evening. My name is Belinda Gary. I'm a city councilor at large.
Good evening, Rick Whiting, Councilor, City Councilor, Ward 1.
Good evening, Tim Cowan, City Councilor, Ward 2.
Good evening, Steve Milks, City Councilor, Ward 3.
Good evening, Jeff Harmon, Mayor.
Good evening, Benjamin Wisner, City Councilor, Ward 4.
Good evening, Leroy Walker, Councilman, Ward 5.
Good evening, Adam Platts, City Council at Large.
Hello, Anaya Aggie, Student Representative.
Good evening, Mubarak Abdullahi, Student Representative.
Hi, Phil Kroll, City Manager.
Thank you. There are no consent items tonight. The first item of business is approval of the minutes from the November 18th, 2024 regular City Council meeting. Are there any errors or corrections? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Moved by Councilor Walker to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Cowan. The vote will be by show of hands. All those in favor? Opposed? 7 having voted in the affirmative and none in the negative, the motion is adopted. There are no communications, presentations, or recognitions this evening. The next item of business will be the first open session. Any member of the public that would like to address the council on an item that is not on tonight's agenda, please approach the podium and provide your name and address. Not seeing any, the open session will be closed. We'll move on to unfinished business. The first item is Ordinance 211118, 2024, Lake Auburn Watershed Text and Map Amendments. This will be a second reading and a public hearing. Is there a motion?
Move to adopt as presented.
Moved by Councilor Whiting. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Walker. If there's any, we will open the public hearing on this item. Any member of the public that would like to address the council on this agenda item, please approach the podium and provide your name and address.
Stephen Beal, 575 Johnson Road. Very briefly, to address some of the questions that were raised by Councilman Wisner, among others, at the workshop session last month. There was some question regarding the degree of involvement of people who actually had agricultural or forestry operations in the watershed in this process. And the answer is, as Mr. Blay had correctly stated, there was an agricultural person, a farmer, although not one who had territory in the watershed, in the group that worked on the ordinance. As to the forestry part of it, Mr. Griswold and I both worked on the forestry parts of the ordinance revisions, and we both have previous employment histories with pulp and paper companies. He far more extensive than mine. He is a licensed forester still in retirement. I am not. We both have substantial sized woodlots. Mine's 93 acres, a good part of which, most of it, is in the watershed. I have about 3/4 of a mile of frontage on Townsend Brook. Mr. Griswold's woodlot is in another territory, but we're both familiar with commercial woodlot operations. And this ordinance was all ready to be presented to you late in May when we discovered that any ordinance in which a municipality seeks to enact or amend an ordinance affecting woodlot in any way has to go and involve the Maine Forest Service. So we had to notify Maine Forest Service. I believe Mr. Cousins did that. And after some bureaucratic delay, had a meeting with the Forest Service representatives. In brief, they liked our ordinance. They thought it was quite strict. Someone on our side, I don't remember exactly who, asked if they would endorse the ordinance, and they said, no, we can't endorse it because it's more restrictive than the state statute is, and we can't do that. But from the point of view of people who do have commercial woodlot operations, Mr. Griswold and I were perfectly satisfied that the restrictions are not so burdensome as to burden a commercial woodlot operator, a cutter, in any significant degree. So the group as a whole was very pleased with the work that we've done on the ordinance, and we recommend its adoption. Thank you.
If there's any other member of the public that would like to address the council, please approach the podium and provide your name and address.
Hello, Evan Sear, 122 Granite Street. This is something that was discussed at the most recent LawPAC meeting, and I think that the general consensus was that members of LawPAC appreciated the work that went into creating further protections. I think we all understand this is work the previous council started. There was an order asking that this next council take it up and review these ordinances, and I think that there's been a wonderful job with regard to phosphorus control and changes to timber harvest and so on and so forth. And I agree with Mr. Beal that some good work done there. At our meeting, there was some discussion around buffers. It's worth noting that I guess LawPAC neither endorsed nor chose to say that they wouldn't endorse this set of ordinances. But one of the things that came up in the discussion, and I'll admit that it primarily came from me, was a question as to buffers. The previous ordinance changed septic buffers from 100 foot to 400 foot, and that seemed reasonable given the need to protect the lake. And I guess my only question, and it's a question I raised at the LawPAC meeting, is why council wouldn't endorse a larger buffer for agriculture, given that new commercial agriculture is not currently allowed under the current ordinance. These changes would allow new commercial agriculture. In looking at septic, 100 foot was the minimum from the state, and the council chose to go with 400. I think erring on the side of caution, recognizing that this is our drinking water source. My question being why the council would not then endorse a larger buffer for agriculture. The minimum state buffer for agriculture, commercial agriculture, is 250 feet, and that's the buffer that is represented in the current ordinance language. So I guess just it was something that came up at the meeting, and questioning why the council wouldn't then also err on the side of caution and use, again, an additionally larger buffer for commercial agriculture, given that current commercial agriculture is not currently allowed, or new, I should say. So why would we not then, again, use a larger buffer than the minimum state for new commercial agriculture? So that was a question that was raised, and I'd be interested if councilors are willing to discuss that, why that's the state minimums being endorsed here for commercial agriculture, but the state minimum for septic was not used previously. So that's my piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public who would like to address the council on this agenda item, please approach the podium and provide your name and address. Not see any. The public hearing will be closed. Discussion by the council. Councilor Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The good Mr. Sear has brought up a valid point. I would like to find out if it was discussed at any point to extend it further to make it comply with our septic and other type of ordinances in the watershed.
Well, I think the recommendation of the group was the 400 feet for septic and 250 feet for agriculture, based on the type of activity that's taking place. 250 feet for agriculture is for tilled land. And that doesn't necessarily pose the same risk to the watershed, or not to the watershed itself, but to the water quality as septic does.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Council Whiting.
Just a comment, I think the other issue that was relevant is the standards related to spreading of manure. I think there are stricter limitations, as well as stricter limitations on the storage and protection of manure, stockpile manure from the elements. So I think that sort of mitigates on the setback issue.
Other questions or comments from the council? Council ready for the question? The vote will be by roll call. The clerk will call the roll.
Counselor Cowan?
Yes.
Counselor Milks?
Yes.
Counselor Weisner?
Yes.
Counselor Walker?
Yes.
Counselor Platts?
Yes.
Counselor Gary?
Yes.
Counselor Whiting?
Yes.
7 having voted in the affirmative and none in the negative, the motion is adopted. We'll move on to new business. The first item is ordinance 2212022024, proposed amendment to section 52-320 regarding prohibited parking on 8th Street. Council Walker?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make an amendment. I move to amend the ordinance of 22-12022024, where it describes the prohibition of parking on 8th Street to replace on both sides. I think what we're saying is we want to change it to on the northerly side only.
Councilor Walker has moved to amend the ordinance. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilor Geary. Is there discussion? Excuse me, is there public comment? Any member of the public that would like to address the council on this, please approach the podium, provide your name and address. Not seeing anyone, close public comment, discussion, or questions by the council. Council Whiting.
Just a question that I'm assuming that the parking limited to one side would provide sufficient parking for the needs.
Yeah, this is really just a drafting correction. My understanding is that when Public Works and the Police Department reviewed the issue, this is what they recommended, and inadvertently, when the agenda item was created, it had parking on both sides. Chief Mullen?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. It was originally posted for the 90 days on the northerly side from Broad Street to the dead end, and the ordinance amendment language was incorrect. So this corrects it.
Further questions? On the motion as amended, the vote will be by show of hands. All those in favor? Opposed? 7 having voted in the affirmative and none in the negative, the motion is adopted. The next item is ordinance 23-1202-2024, text amendments related to 30A MRSA subsection 4364, 4364A, and 4364B. Is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I would move to postpone this ordinance 23-120-22024 to the December 16th, 2024 regular city council meeting for the following reasons.
Well, let's get a second. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilor Geary. Councilor Whiting?
Thank you. Number one, the staff has identified several technical drafting issues that need to be corrected, so we need to give them time to do that. The public notice for the December 16th meeting has been published, so we can have a first reading and a public hearing on that date. And it will also allow time for it to be corrected to reflect the intent of the planning board. We want to respect what their work as translated by city staff into this final document.
Other discussion, questions, or comments by the council? Council ready for the question? On the motion to postpone until the December 16th meeting, the vote will be by show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? 7 having voted in the affirmative and none in the negative, the motion's adopted. The next item is ordinance 24-1202-024, a proposed amendment to chapter 14 regarding blasting. This will be for a first reading. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Counselor Wisner for adoption. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Geary. Any member of the public that would like to comment on this agenda item, please approach the podium and provide your name and address.
Yes, hi, my name is Anthony, and I live at 119 Everett Road in Poland. I'd like to thank for having this open meeting about the discussion of the new blasting ordinance for Auburn. My name is Tony. I am part of a very small group of hobbyists who collect mineral specimens at Mount Appetite West, which is on the left side of Hatch Road on private property. Our summertime working hours are mostly on Saturdays, Sundays, and some holidays when the weather is good. We are hobbyists who like to try to find new mineral specimens for our own personal collection and not in the hobby to make a profit. In order to find new specimens, we do have to drill and blast very small amounts of top rock to get lower down into the zone where mineral specimens may have formed into crystals we could find and collect. We remove the top rock first. By that method, the most holes we drill would be 5 or 6 holes, 6 to 8 feet deep. That comes out to about 16 cubic yards of rock. The amount of explosives that for that total blast would be 9 to 9.5 pounds of explosive for all the holes drilled. Our next step is to drill less holes that are less deep and use much less explosives because we may be close to where mineral crystals may have been formed, and using less explosives would help not to damage any crystals that are present. Any blast we do is in a westerly direction, which is away from any houses or structures. We have signage on the entrance road, which is gated with keep out signs, private property signs, and also closer to the small quarry we are working in are also posted with keep out signs. We have been working in this small quarry for quite a few years now in the summertime and would like to continue our hobby trying to find new mineral specimens. We will work with the city council in any way possible so that we could be allowed to continue our summertime hobby.
Thank you. Just for clarification, it's not clear to me, do you think that this ordinance would prohibit you from engaging in that activity?
Well, now, reading the ordinance, usually I get my permit from the fire department in Auburn, and then, I get my permit so I can go blasting for the summer. But reading the ordinance, it kind of suggests that I'd have to go to the planning board, the code enforcement officer, things like that.
Just to clarify, quarry and extractive industry is covered under this. You would no longer, you might still have to get a permit from the fire department for the storage and transportation. The fire chief's here, he could probably answer this, of your explosive material. You would get a permit from the planning office, and if there are some differences in the ordinance for quarrying activity if you're using under 20 pounds of explosives.
Correct.
But this ordinance would not prohibit you from continuing your activity. You would just need to get the permit from the planning office and follow the rules relative to quarrying.
Correct. So we do have storage, and we're inspected by the ATF, and we're inspected by the state. We have stickers on our boxes, so all of that is legal. I have my fingerprints with the FBI and.
Yeah, so the fire chief may be able to help us here. This, as I understand it, this ordinance would have no effect on the storage and transportation of the explosive materials. They keep doing what they're doing. Is that correct?
Yes, so the storage requirements are that's all federally licensed and state permitted. We don't intend, if this ordinance is adopted, to require a fire department permit. We're going to communicate with planning, with the code enforcement and planning department just for notification, so we're aware. So there won't be 2 permits needed from the city. It'll just be through planning and permitting. We did redraft since the workshop this ordinance, taking into consideration some of what we found out with the community stakeholder piece, including this gentleman's concerns about the mineral exploration, hobby mining. And we put in the 25-pound exemption. That exemption really is 25 pounds of blast or less. That's more than 500 feet from any structure, so it's very conservative, and it meets their needs. I think the one piece in here that I've heard him express that we haven't addressed in this ordinance, and certainly would take council feedback, is they do much of their work on weekends and holidays, and the ordinance still currently prohibits weekend blasting and holiday blasting. And so that's certainly something that could be edited if you'd like, but this still does currently prohibit weekend and holiday blasting.
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Thank you,
Great.
sir.
Great, we work on weekends.
Yeah. Any other member of the public that would like to address the council, please approach the podium. Seeing none, public comment will be closed. Questions or comments by the council? Council
I
Walker.
guess the question is, would that stop him from being able to do the weekend blasting?
Yeah, I think the way this is drafted right now, and Mr. Cousins or Chief Chase can answer this, I think the way this is drafted right now, some holidays are prohibited in weekend blasting, but I think that really the view of this was more towards commercial blasting, and taking that comment, I think we could look at this before the second reading and see if some accommodation could be made for the days in which blasting can take place for these types of small mineral exploration activities. Is that, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. Some of the burdensome things like the seismological monitoring that are really important around quarries or construction sites that are in neighborhoods, that stuff would be exempted in these small things. So we did take some considerations of their operation, but I think the one thing that is not yet addressed in there to allow them to continue as they always have is the weekend or holiday blasting.
Yeah, so we could, Council Walker, we could take that into consideration, and staff can bring back any potential amendment that they think would accommodate this when we meet for second reading. Councilor Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This, well, from what this kind gentleman has said, this has been going on for quite a while. And if that's the case, has there been any neighbor complaints about the activities, or have they even noticed that things are going on?
We've issued his permit annually for many years, and we've received no complaints about it. It's remote. The nearest abutter is the property owner and the residents. They have a working relationship, and we've gotten no complaints about issues with this operation.
And there's no fear of startled animals or different things like that?
Our intent here was we built in that 500-foot buffer, which is very much in excess of even some of the bigger blasting that might happen for construction. So I think the scale is incrementally small. If I were to use the NFPA standard about how much blast could occur at the distance he is from any structures, it's in the order of 125 pounds of explosives. And we've limited it here to be ultra conservative without a bunch of additional checks to limiting him to 25 pounds. So we've made it ultra conservative that I think, based on his distances and setbacks, should allow it to be pretty non-obtrusive.
Other
Thank
questions? Councilor Geary. Other questions or comments by the council? Council ready for the question?
So we're going to modify this for the second reading to make sure it's clarified, if Eric thinks we need to give this gentleman the exception that they need for their organization.
Right. Staff's going to
Make sure when I vote yes, that that's under that guidance. Okay.
The staff is going to look at this. I think the real issue is days of the week is the real issue that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah.
Mr. Manager?
Thanks, Mayor. I think, we'll certainly take a look at it. There's some language in here already that talks about exceptions due to hardships. And so what we want to make sure that we're careful of when we rewrite or make any modification to this, that we're not writing it for specific for one area. We want to ensure that you may not want weekend blasting in another area. So we can work that language within section 14708 so that that language will allow the director to go ahead and issue that permit if they feel that there's no conflict. Good.
Council ready for the question? Vote will be by roll call. The clerk will call the roll.
Counselor Milks?
Yes.
Counselor Weisner?
Yes.
Counselor Walker?
Yes.
Counselor Platts?
Yes.
Counselor Gary?
Yes.
Counselor Whiting?
Yes.
Counselor Cowan?
Yes.
7 having voted in the affirmative and none in the negative, the motion is adopted. We'll move on to reports. So I have a brief report tonight. I attended the New Beginnings open house in Lewiston since we last met. Members of the council and public might recall that New Beginnings has expanded their youth shelter capabilities. They held an open house. It was very informative. I was able to learn quite a lot about their program and make some referrals to Auburn City staff for programs that would be helpful in their work. I also attended the opening of the Sweetser Health and Healing Center. This is a certified community behavioral health clinic. It's in the same building as Spare Time Recreation. It will significantly expand the mental health capabilities, and they'll be offering walk-in mental health and drug addiction services, which is something that isn't offered in Lewiston, Auburn today. I wanted lastly to comment on the Chamber of Commerce Finest Under 40 event. We had several nominees, Councilor Platts under the business area, Councilor Weisner under the insurance area, and Kelsey Earl, our finance director in finance. There were lots of really great applicants, and Kelsey Earl was selected to receive the award in finance. Well deserved, and congratulations. With that, we'll move on to the councilors. Councilor Geary.
I'll defer to my committee chair and their leader of the age-friendly group.
Councilor Whiting.
Thank you. Auburn Public Library has its annual holiday bazaar from 9 to 1 this Saturday morning for people of all ages. And they also have Read to a Dog, one of my personal favorites in the children's department, from 9 to 10 for kids that want to practice in a low-pressure, loving environment, practice reading.
Councilor Cowan.
I might have to join that. Kids of all ages, right? Just briefly on the ad hoc committee on homelessness, our next meeting is on is next Thursday, and so if people are interested in attending, we'd be happy to have you there. We're making good progress on recommendations, and we'll keep you posted.
Councilor Milks.
None tonight.
Councilor Weisner.
Nothing.
Councilor Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to announce that the Thanksgiving dinner went over very well. We had 105 people show up that day. We fed them all. I want to say thank you to our volunteers, especially that made everything go so well. And thank you to our people that donated so that the expenses are not all on the city. We have some kind-hearted people out there that help us put this on money-wise. Then I'd like to announce the new Auburn tree lighting with Santa Claus coming at 5:30 December 7th, which is Saturday. And don't confuse it with the one the city's put it on, please. This one is put on by the United New Auburn Association. Saturday, December 7th, 5:30, Sullivan Park, which is right behind Rowley's Diner. And we expect 150 to 200 kids. So come on down and have some fun with us. We also have refreshments, and a few other things. Bring your children down, you'll have a great time with Santa.
Council Platt?
Thank you. Yeah, a couple updates on the budget process for the school department. At our last meeting, we received a summary of the budget process moving forward. So I just want to give you guys some dates. I'm sure those will be coming up in front of you again and again, but here's your first look at some important dates with the school department. On December 16th, we will be having a joint workshop. No? Has that been nixed?
Yeah, it's going to be in January.
That's going to be in January. Forget what I was about to tell you in December 16th. Moving on from that, every Wednesday in March, so we're going to have a joint workshop with the school department. It was scheduled for December 16th. Sounds like that's been kicked to January. After that, the school department will be following up, the school committee will be following up. Wednesdays in March will be the presentations for each of the departments within the school department, if you're interested in showing up and following along with those budget presentations. On April 2nd will be the school committee public hearing. May 7th, scheduled as of now, this could change, but May 7th, the school committee is hoping to approve their budget. May 19th, I believe council's hoping to approve approve the school's budget. And the referendum for the school budget is planned for June 10th. So you'll hear those dates again, but here's just the first look at the budget process for the school. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Eggy?
Nothing tonight.
Representative Abdullahi?
Nothing tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I have a few items. First, there's a culvert on Stetson Road that was inspected about a year ago from Maine DOT. They gave us about a 5-year notice of replacing that culvert. We had worked that into our CIP, knowing that we would need to replace it. We were looking to time that with the secondary water line that Lewiston would be bringing through that section, so the timing was going to work really well. DOT came back out a couple weeks ago, inspected that culvert again. They found that it deteriorated a lot faster than they had planned. They will be restricting that culvert to 3-ton allowance for passage, and then we'll be needing to move on replacing that a lot sooner. So anticipation of that, the pavement plant closes in the next 2 days. And so, so we have moved to take care of an issue on North River Road, because that section of North River Road will be used more frequently as a result of the restriction on Stetson Road. So, so from Stetson Road on North River, from Stetson to Bradman, they started today scraping that road up, and then they'll begin paving it. What we'll be bringing, this was obviously an emergency allocation, but what we'll be bringing to you, council, at the next meeting will be that we have funds that were unallocated within CIP that will be seeking to be reallocated to this project. If the council was to move forward on that. If not, then we would use the emergency fund to address this. But that's our solution for this issue. This will be, as many of you know, North River Road certainly needed to be dealt with. We were waiting, obviously, for the secondary water line. It just means when it's redone, it'll be, back to that. But it's, we're probably, as a result, when we had planned this, we were looking at somewhere around, probably around $200,000 in savings, timing this with the rest of the project. We'll still have some savings, but not to the extent of that. But we are moving on that, and we hope that will be paved within the next 2 days, so before the plant closes. So just wanted to give you an update on that as a result of the DOT inspection. Our council's reps were interviewed this evening as part of our podcast program, so you'll be seeing, or hearing rather, their podcast. I think it'll be coming out on Thursday, so encourage you to take a look at that when it comes out. 2 more items for you. One, the Powell Center did a great job, as Councilor Walker was saying, regarding Thanksgiving. I think the Powell Center distributed somewhere around 50 baskets for Thanksgiving out to the community with a great deal of assistance from the Auburn Exchange Club and some other gracious partners. So they did a great job with that. This Sunday, December 8th, is a festive day for Auburn. We'll have the shopping sheds in Anniversary Park will be open from 11 to 3 with various vendors selling their goods there. So encourage people to come out for that. The parade will begin at 3:30 on Main Street at Mill Street, and we'll go to Festival Plaza. We'll have the tree lighting at 4:15-ish, somewhere's in there, based on the parade. We had a beautiful tree. It was donated by the Jaguar family in New Auburn. So come in, take a look at that on Sunday. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Ms. Earl, Finance Report.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. So you have the August report in the agenda again this time because we unexpectedly were unable to attend the last meeting due to sickness. So apologies for that. So you have two reports this meeting. On the August report, there was nothing of note to be concerned about. It's still that pared down report. So you've seen this again for the second time, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I have more to say about the September report, which has a lot more information than what I've been providing previously. Like I had mentioned, trying to add in some of those things that you may be more interested in knowing additional details about. So is there any questions about the August report?
Question? Go ahead to the September.
All right. So September, I would like to make note of a correction. So when you approve, if you could approve with this correction, in the general fund highlights, it discusses the fire and EMS transport revenues. It's 19.5%, not 195%. So it's missing that point. So apologies for that. The reason for that difference is that the collections agency that we use had turnover in staff. Better numbers as we've moved along here, but there was a dip there while they didn't have anyone to actually send that information over to us. We generally average around or capture 7,000 to 9,000 per month through that collections agreement. So it is a favorable agreement for us. So even though there was that slight dip, we expect we'll be able to make that up over the next few months. To note, this is just the period 3, so just the third month of the fiscal year for us, but we are in good shape. We're around 28.5% of our budgeted revenues. That's compared to 34.4 of last year. As for expenditures, we're at 18.48, which was compared to 21.4 of last year. A difference you'll see in this report is detail on the departments. So I've included not just the totals of each department in the report, but you'll see line by line percentage. So as we're getting closer to budget season, that'll give you some additional information to look at. You'll also notice in the tables, or graphs rather, the graphs now reflect the current year to date compared to last fiscal year at the same period, and an average of the 4 previous years. So it gives a better picture of a comparison rather than saying, as we have in the past, of we're expected to be at 8.33% at this month of the year. That's just taking the 12 months and averaging it out. This way, your comparison is looking at what we've actually taken in for revenue or what we've actually expended around these times, this time of year. So that will be moving forward in each report. You'll have those comparisons, which again gives you a better idea of what we're looking at for actuals rather than hypotheticals. No significant variances of note, but you'll see those things that I've mentioned moving forward. And if you have any other suggestions for ways to improve this report, things that you would like to see, I'd love to hear them. But that's all I have for September.
Questions on the September report? Is there a motion to accept the August report?
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Cowan. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Milks. The vote will be by show of hands. All those in favor? Opposed? 7 having voted in the affirmative, none in the negative. The report is accepted. Is there a motion to approve the September report as amended?
So moved.
Moved by Council
Second.
Whiting, seconded by Council Melks. Vote will be by show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? 7 having voted in the affirmative and none in the negative, the motion's adopted. We'll now move on to the second open session of the evening. Any members of the public that would like to address the council on any issue or topic that's not on tonight's agenda, please approach the podium and provide your name and address.
Good evening, Council. Jason Levesque, 205 Young's Corner Road. I want to just make some comments in general about Chapter 60 and upcoming ordinance changes to that chapter. I was going to speak a little earlier specifically about the agenda item, but it was postponed to December 16th. In case I can't be at the December 16th meeting, I'd like to state some facts here for you to review, or at least think about in preparation for that December 16th meeting. This is a pretty broad, sweeping changes that are being discussed at Chapter 60, a lot of which are in complete conflict with our current and active and a state-approved comprehensive plan. I think we need to look at that and look at the intent as well as the letter of the comprehensive plan as well. Specifically, capping only duplexes to be built in growth areas of the city that include our urban zone, our suburban neighborhood, is not already defined as a rural character area. You can almost see that happening in our agricultural zone, our low-density country residential zone. It's more of a rural character. You could actually pass a straight face test on that. But any other areas, any other underlying zones within our stated growth areas should not have these arbitrary caps. I would remind everybody, in case we might have forgotten, we're still in the middle of a housing crisis. The housing crisis is not going to be solved by large developers coming in with 100, 200 units. It's going to be solved, as it is starting to be in Auburn, by individual property owners that are building an ADU, a duplex, or even a triplex. And a triplex, and they're all throughout our city. And if we really think about it, they're in pretty much every zone. So I want to make sure that we're understanding that we're actually going backward and we're being more restrictive on these ordinance changes. Speaking of backward, talk about the retroactivity of January 1, 2024. That sets an extremely bad precedence. When you're actually making an ordinance change that affects individuals that may or may, or that may have already received permission, now you're putting them in a legal position in which they have to actually argue for vested rights, that they've already started this process. I want you to remember the CMP corridor issue. They won that argument of vested rights. I also want to remind you to look back at a lawsuit filed against the City of Auburn in late summer, fall of last year, talking about the authority of the council to make retroactive changes to ordinances. Okay, this has come up multiple times, and I'm afraid the city is actually setting itself up for legal action against it in multiple different fashions. I could go on about the minimum lot size doubling in a lot of areas for an ADU. It's in your purview, but it goes completely counter to what we talked about, what was approved in the comprehensive plan of 2021, 2022. It goes against the motto of the city, no steps backward, or no backward steps. I always get that one backwards. But we're looking at different things here to make Auburn more restrictive. You're sending a bad message to developers or people that are trying to come to the city saying, well, I can get something approved today, but I have to worry about it being unapproved through retroactivity of ordinance. So there's a lot of pitfalls here. There's a lot of things that are going to affect the overall character of the city of Auburn negatively and the image that we have within the broader region and the state. I'll leave you with this. I looked everywhere, and I've been following. This is my first time in a year in this chamber, so it's kind of nice to be back. I haven't seen any neighborhood meetings about any zoning changes. Last council, arguably, was charged with not having enough public neighborhood meetings outside of City Hall, outside of council, outside of planning board. And I might be wrong, but I have seen absolutely no neighborhood meetings outside of council, outside of planning board, discussing ordinances. And something that may be portrayed as trivial is actually monumental. And it deserves, same thing with the watershed, it deserves to have those neighborhood meetings so you can bring this message and hear from the people. You still have time to do that, especially since you postponed it to December 16th, and I hope that does happen, though it's hard around the holidays. So I just want to give you something to think about as you continue your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public who'd like to address the council, please approach the podium, provide your name and address.
Hello, Evan Sear, 122 Granite Street. I did speak earlier. I mentioned that I'm on the Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission. I would like to ask the council to consider, and I recognize that you're not required to do this. You're not required to listen to any outside entity, but to consider policy or ordinance that would specifically incorporate recommendations from LawPAC. I understand that we're all trying to get things done. I've sat behind that dais trying to get things done in a timely manner myself, and I understand that it can seem like a hindrance to have to ask for opinion of outside sources, but I think it would be possible to create an ordinance or policy in which the council would only affect a change in the watershed after hearing a recommendation from LawPAC. Of course, it'd be a recommendation. These things are not binding. I think it'd be reasonable to say, within a 90-day period as well, so that, council isn't being tied up indefinitely waiting for this recommendation. But I think given that it's our water source and that we do have an organization, an entity, a quasi-municipal organization that's comprised of multiple municipalities, I think it's worth trying to formally incorporate their expertise. On that same vein, and I'm not sure council can do anything about this per se, or if there's appetite to do this, but I do question how rebuttals to public comment occur, specifically regarding ordinance change language. For instance, tonight there was a rebuttal to a comment I made, and I'm not sure that had something been stated differently, there would be a different outcome. But it's very frustrating to sit down and be rebutted with incorrect information. For instance, that the 250-foot buffer was only for tillage. It's actually, the language is quite clear in the ordinance that it's for tillage or where there's livestock or poultry. So clearly this is also pasture land, right? Where these animals are defecating within 250 feet of the lake. Would that have made a big difference on the second reading? Maybe not. That's my fault for coming in Johnny-come-lately, and I recognize that, understanding how the process works. If I was really going to be passionate about that, I probably should have come earlier. But it raises the point that if text language is going to be rebutted, that's been brought up, I think it would be possible to create a policy in which the council requires that the actual text language be cited, right? If a member of the public questions text language, I think it's more than reasonable to pull up the language and say, this is actually what the language says, and that's okay. I think that would be helpful for the council, but also helpful for the public, the individual asking the question, but also other members of the public who are now hearing two different conflicting things. Just some thoughts to think about, possibly being able to incorporate LawPAC in a more formal manner, and then also thinking about how we deal with specifically rebuttals of text language. So, thank you.
Any other member of the public who'd like to address the council, please approach the podium, provide your name and address.
Evening. My name is Michael Sherest, and I'm at 131 6th Street in Auburn. I kind of have an issue with the Public Works Department. This is an issue that's been going on for quite some time. It was around 5 years ago. There was a tree that fell on a retaining wall that was on private property. It damaged the wall. The Public Works Director at the time doesn't work for the city anymore, but he basically instructed myself and my father, Arthur Sherest, who was also the owner of the residence that I just spoke of. He's no longer with us, so that's why I'm here. Basically instructed us to remove the wall because it was falling from the tree that hit it, and it was falling into the sidewalk. It was unsafe. Of course, I explained at the time that I wouldn't have to remove the wall if the tree didn't fall on it. So I told them if the city will replace my wall, I'll take care of the cost of removing the wall that is currently there. And it's about a railroad tied wall, about 30 feet. But it was quite big, and it was considerable cost to myself removing it. And here it has been 5 years, and I've addressed several people at the city about this, including Councilor Walker. In 2022, I'd sent him a few emails, we'd spoken about it. He said he would look into it, but still I don't have a wall, and the retaining wall is gone, so all the dirt is kind of brushing down into the sidewalk. The sidewalk is also very damaged from the tree, not just because it's got broken cement sidewalk, but the tree had its roots coming up from on the ground. And the city plows for the sidewalk won't even go down that road because it's so damaged. They won't go down the sidewalk and plow the sidewalk. So, basically, I've been trying to get the city to replace the wall. Now my front porch on 6th Street, where the address is falling somewhat. It's not completely falling, but it's dropped about probably an inch in the last 5 years. And I'm sure sooner or later it's going to fall the rest of the way eventually. It's an old porch. I can't even tear it down if I wanted to, because in order to build a new porch there, I need a retaining wall. I can't put a retaining wall there, even if I was to do it myself, because the sidewalk's not fixed. You can't do one without the other. The sidewalk itself is unsafe. And basically in the last 5 years, nothing's been done. They come over, they've looked at it. I've spoken to the current Director of Public Works, Scott Holland. I've had several meetings with him. He's come over and looked at the sidewalk. He assured me something would be done. Nothing's been done. Currently, I'm a little perturbed by the fact that the City of Auburn is replacing a retaining wall for BJ's, a multi-million-dollar company. The City of Auburn is paying for this wall, and yet I can't get mine replaced in 5 years. I don't know what to do. So I thought I would address all of you.
We're all set. Thank you. I'll try to address some of this to the council. So Mr. Charest is correct. I think the request was back in 2022 when that was brought forward. Just related to the BJ's wall, that's not BJ's property. That's the City of Auburn's property. So we have a responsibility to maintain that because it's on city land. We'll follow up with Mr. Charest. I think that the wall retention budget that's in CIP, we have several projects in there. Mr. Charest is correct that that has been reviewed. Public Works has gone out. It is currently in the plan for replacement, and as funds become available, we use those funds to replace those walls. In this case, it's assessed as far as safety matters, and if there's a safety issue that will rise one project over another, that takes place. And so as walls deteriorate, the team does go out and assess that. So that's currently in the plan and to be reconstructed. And so we'll have more through the budget process, so you'll know where we are. I'll meet with the staff and follow up with Mr. Charest just on where we are currently, because some other projects certainly had come above that because of the way that they had deteriorated and was falling into the sidewalk. But we will follow up on that.
Thank you. Any other member of the public who'd like to address the council, please approach the podium. Not seeing any, the open session will be closed. We will be having an executive session tonight for an item that came to the city's attention after the agenda was published, but for which the council needs to act tonight. So, Council Wisner.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move to suspend the rules to allow an executive session to be added to the agenda.
Councilor Walker has moved to, Wisner has moved to suspend the rules. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilor Geary. The vote will be by show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? 7 having voted in the affirmative and none in the negative. The motion is adopted. Councilor Wisner.
I move to have it, to open an executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 405-6C to discuss an economic development matter, the sale of 15 Academy Street.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Walker. Is there, vote will be by show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? 7 having voted in the affirmative and none in the negative. We will be in executive session. For the public, there is no action expected coming out of this executive session. We expect the council to adjourn immediately following the conclusion of the executive session.